Is UK farming bad for the environment? Hello, I'm Griff Rees, welcome to Gwyn and Griffith. Here we talk everything beekeeping, farming, countryside living, and we do reviews as well. Now today, I'm in the studio with lambing next door. You can hear the sheep there buying away. But this is a very important message, and this year, over the last couple of months, there's been a lot of programmes on TV really bad-mouthing UK farming, downgrading farming, and just putting TV programmes putting a lot of fake facts out there about UK farming, and they've probably got another agenda behind the scenes of why they want to go down that road. But I feel that they don't want to go down the vegan road or the going vegetarian road, or they don't want to go down the road of farming, it's not looking after animals, etc. They want to try and use greenhouse gases, carbon emissions, etc. to attack farming, and there's a lot of bad and wrong facts out there, so I'm just going to highlight the facts in this video and confirm if they're true or not. Let's get into it. Is it more efficient to plant UK land with arable crops instead of farming it for meat? Well, the answer to that question is, well, that's not true. 65% of the land in the UK is only suitable for growing grass, and there's a few reasons for that. A lot of slopes, a lot of wet areas that's too cold, access not very good, get these large machinery in, fields are very small. There's a lot of factors that come into that of why our ground here in the UK isn't suitable for arable crop. And if you don't believe me, per acre you get more money for arable crops. So if it was viable for farmers in the UK to grow arable crops and make more money, then they would have done so already. But the ground we've got is 65% is suitable for grass and nothing else. So the climate conditions in the UK makes it one of the best places in the world to grow grass sustainably, produce meat sustainably. Farming damages the environment. Now, there is some truth in that. Of course, farming does damage the environment in one way or another, but compared it to any other industry, transportation, aviation, industry, construction, all those industries will damage the environment in one way or the other. So agriculture is not immune to that. But if you ask me, out of all those categories, farming is probably the least damaging to the environment. Just to elaborate on that, so within the UK, the government gives out agri-grants, so agricultural grants. Now these grants are put in place to improve biodiversity and wildlife. So the majority of the hedgerows in the UK is protected by law. These grants, then, there's incentive to double fence these hedgerows, make them wider, because a hedge in itself is a wildlife corridor. There's a lot of biodiversity in hedgerows and a lot of wildlife living in the hedgerow, so all that's protected under the Agri Grant. And underneath the grant, another branch of that grant, then you've got woodland creation, pond creation, habitat creation, where the government subsidises farmers to carry out these wildlife promoting tasks on their farm for a small financial fee to benefit biodiversity and wildlife. No other industry out there can do that because they haven't got access to the farmland. For example, you know, if you're in transportation, most transportation is going to be on tarmac or concrete. There's nothing there that you can do to help wildlife or biodiversity. When you're farming, you're in the countryside, you're in the middle of nature, it's a totally different aspect, and you can improve biodiversity and wildlife through those agri schemes, and that runs hand in hand with farming. And at the end of the day, go out for a drive into the countryside and just look at how beautiful the UK countryside really is. You've got massive rolling hills, big woodlands, massive rivers, and the reason that countryside looks the way it does is due to the way that land is farmed. So thank the farmers for why the countryside is looking that good. Farming in the UK drains the country's water supply. Now this couldn't be further from the truth. Now in the UK we get a huge amount of rain. That's why our rivers are so big, that's why there's always flooding now and again in the news. It's because of the volume of rain we get. And of course that level of rain is bad for growing arable crops, but it's extremely good for growing grass, and grass is used to make meat, whether it's white meat or red meat. Grass is very, very, very important in the production of meat, and that is why we are a meat growing country here in the UK. Now, to give some statistics, 85% of the water used in beef production comes from rainfall. Now compare that to other parts of the world. They don't get anywhere near the amount of rain, therefore they can't produce meat as sustainable as we can in the UK. British grown meat is full of antibiotics. Again, this is false. The UK has one of the lowest levels of antibiotic use in Europe when it comes to farming. And on top of that, antibiotics consumption was reduced by 53% between 2014 and 2019. So even though we're still reducing the amount of antibiotics we use, farmers like myself, we only use antibiotics when we have to, and that is given either orally or more commonly in an injection form. We don't feed it into the feed. Now some parts of the world, their daily feed contains antibiotic, and those countries use an antibiotic as a fail-safe program really to stop the animal going ill. In the UK we don't do that. We only use antibiotics when it's needed. And another step we do to safeguard the meat production when that goes to market is every time an animal gets an antibiotic or some kind of dose, that's got a withdrawal time on the bottle. Now that animal cannot be killed until that withdrawal time has passed. So therefore you give something an antibiotic on the farm, that animal stays on the farm until that withdrawal date is over, then you're only allowed to sell that animal. So again, there's lots of safety procedures in place on the farm to protect the consumer from antibiotic use. Farming uses up an enormous amount of electricity and doesn't produce any itself. Again, this is false. Farming doesn't consume a massive amount of electricity when you compare it to other industries, and farming does contribute to the electricity within the UK and feeds that into the grid. Farmers not only produces energy, but it produces renewable energy, and it's estimated that it produces enough energy, electricity, to power 10 million homes in the UK. Now those renewable energies, they come from solar, wind, biomass and big anaerobic digesters. Farming doesn't contribute to the economy in the UK. Well, again, that fact is totally false. Farming within the UK is worth 122 billion to the economy. Now it's not just farmers that gain from that. There's a massive amount of industry that exists off the back of farming. Let me explain. So we'll take dairy into consideration. The farmer milks his cows every day. Then a lorry needs to come to that farm every day to collect the milk. That lorry company needs to buy a lorry, maintain that lorry, employ a driver. Now that milk goes to another factory where the milk is pasteurised. You've got a huge amount of equipment, huge amount of staff in that factory. That milk then goes to the supermarket. Again, another massive industry, another massive employer. So farming directly and indirectly contributes huge amount of money into the economy, and produces a massive amount of jobs directly and indirectly. Farming produces more greenhouse gases than any other industry in the UK. Again, this is totally false. Now let's pull up this graph by the NFU and let's analyse it. Let's see what it says. So right at the top you've got transport producing 27% of our greenhouse gases. The next big one is energy. Business is then at 17%, residential is 15%, and right at the bottom there, that's agriculture. So agriculture only produces 10% of the greenhouse gases in the UK. Now that is 2.5 times lower than the global average. So again, UK farming produces some of the most sustainable meat in the UK, and not just the UK, in the world. It's one of the, if you're really keen on buying sustainable meat, sustainable produce, sustainable vegetables, then the UK is one of the leading countries in the world that produces their food sustainably while looking after the environment, and these statistics, they prove that. Now the reason that level is so low in the UK compared to the global average, it's because we're on a grass-based system. 65% of the farmland we've got here is grass. That is used to feed the cow, that is used to feed the lamb, that is used to feed all sorts of animals. And that grass grows naturally. It rains a lot, that grows, the cows eat it, the sheep eat it, whatever, and that grass keeps growing back and back and back again. And while the grass is growing, that is sucking carbon from out of the air, storing it in the ground. And yes, even though the cow eats the grass, releases some methane, releases some carbon back into the air, there's a life cycle there. The grass keeps growing and sucks it back into the ground. So that is very, very sustainable. Compare that to fossil fuel. You extract the coal, you extract the oil, you burn it, that goes back into the environment, then that cannot go back into the ground to store that carbon. You've got to create a whole other industry of carbon storage to take that carbon out of the environment. Farming is a natural life cycle of carbon being released, carbon being restored into the ground, and animals have been doing that since the beginning of time. So, is British farming destroying the planet? Well, certainly in the UK it's not. And I'll just leave you with this thought. If you were to go into your garage, lock the door, start your car up, and then go to sleep in your garage, you'd be dead in the morning. Now take the car out of that garage, put 5 cows in there, 5 sheep, 5 pigs, close the door and go to sleep. You'll wake up warm and alive. Now it's about time we get serious about what's really causing these gases. Thanks for watching the video.